Dutch companies have not shown enough interest in this sector. We want to see Dutch companies use their integrated resources and work towards a more sustainable approach to mining in Nigeria. The following areas may also be interesting for those interested in solid minerals: establishing coal-fired power plants and mineral processing value addition industries. Services. This sector is the biggest contributor to Nigeria's economy. The subsector that may interest investors are telecom and ICT, especially ICT infrastructure, financial services, like in insurance, tourism, investment in business tourism, especially in Lagos and Abuja, for instance, and creative industries such as the film, music, broadcasting, and publishing. Nigeria has one of the fastest growing entertainment industries in the world, just second after the Hollywood. We call ours, our own version is in Hollywood, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. So, construction and real estate. Nigeria has a housing stock deficit of over 20 million housing units as a result of rapid urbanization and population growth. The sector is expected to grow on the back of private and public investments. Our National Housing Fund cannot deliver it all because of the huge investment involved, to the tune of an estimated 56 trillion naira. Investment in sustainable cities and low-cost housing in some major cities like Abuja, Lagos, Port Harcourt, Kano, Kaduna, and Enugu will be a profitable investment. Oil and gas. As you are aware, this is the dominant sector of Nigeria's economy for decades. It has two subsectors: the upstream, which include the crude oil and natural gas production, mostly for exports, and downstream. In the downstream sector, we have 4 refineries with an installed capacity of 445,000 barrels a day, but have been operating far below installed capacity. We believe that we have opportunities here for investors. And investment here will include building critical pipeline infrastructure, gas infrastructure development, building gas-fired power plants to reduce gas flaring, and rehabilitation and revamping of existing refineries. And finally, infrastructure. The 2 areas of concern here are power and transport. Huge investment is needed, and the government intends to leverage private sector capital in a variety of ways, such as public-private partnership, special purpose vehicle, and investment funds, and various guarantee agreements. Investment opportunities are as follows. Under power, we have opportunities for renewable energy, power generation, transmission, and distribution. And under transport, we have roads, rail, airports, and seaports development, and dredging of inland waterways.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. We couldn't see you, but we could hear you very clearly. We are now also joined by the Dutch Consul General in Lagos, Mr. Jan van Weijen.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you very much, Your Excellency, Ambassador Ngofa, for your extensive and very good work down of relations between the Netherlands and Nigeria, and also for the economic and recovery plan that offers specific chances also for the Dutch community and the Dutch companies. I would also vouch the excellent relations that exist between Nigeria and the Netherlands, has been shown at mutual visits that unfortunately until Corona were going on quite on a regular basis. but we envisage still resuming these visits, and also the many companies that visit Nigeria. But of course, our main task is economic cooperation and helping the Dutch business community to establish itself here and to deal with the business climate that can be challenging sometimes. What we're doing at the moment, apart from bring them home, is to bring, and that's also why I commend you with the help of all other organizations, so opportunities that still exist in the market and that will resume once business comes back to normal. I'm saying that I'm very happy with the breakdown that His Excellency the Ambassador gave, because it gives me a very free run on and structure. So if you look at the sectors, the Ambassador already called agriculture, and I see that this is also on the agenda for today, so I won't say too much about it. But there's a strong existing cooperation, and also the Dutch government is really busy and working on that, also with government's funding. So this will hopefully commence the second part of the year. We're also looking forward for a circular economy initiative. There was a scoping mission last year, and this we have very, very good cooperation with Lagos state government, which is very entrepreneurial, and they're really looking into possibilities of making Lagos, well, the power hub, the power and economic power engine for Africa, a more world-class city. So this is an ongoing upgrading of Lagos as the commercial capital of West Africa. You will look into initiatives that really bring the city towards a more converged international economic place. This is going on. So we talk about, for example, the waterways. There is an initiative going on to use the waterways of Lagos better. And I also see that Mr. Stevel Heukelom is on the panel, so I won't say too much about that either. But it really looks into using the existing possibilities that are sometimes hampered by institutional setups. Once they are freed, there's far more possibilities within existing resources to upgrade and expand the city.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Now we're going to the owner and founder of Naijalink, our partner for this webinar today. And we're here from Mrs. Thessa Bagu.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining this webinar. Pleasure to be here together with the NABC. My name is Thessa. As Arne says, I've been in Lagos or Nigeria for close to 14 years. I have a little presentation, and don't worry, it's not going to be death by PowerPoint if I can avoid it. But I wanted to talk a bit about what is happening now, which is pretty disastrous. I know that we want to look at the opportunities going forward, but the short-term perspective is going to be really bad. And I'd like to point out that apart from government revenue dropping significantly, remittances are also expected to drop by almost 25%. Now, remittances, its income, according to the World Bank, is higher than fuel income, higher than the oil revenue for Nigeria. That means that the average Nigerian was surviving for a large part because of it. So you will see lower domestic demand in the short term. It also brings an opportunity, what is happening with the oil market, and that the fuel subsidy, which has been taking a lot of the budget, can finally be removed, freeing up some money, hopefully. So short-term perspective is pretty bad. The country does not have the buffers it had in the last few crises. I mean, I've been here since 2006, so I've been through Ebola, I've been through the commodity crisis, some elections that could have a bad impact on business as well, but we don't have buffers. So short term, Nigeria is not doing very well. What it does do is that it is forcing Nigeria to finally take measures that it has been, deliberating on for a long time. And that is not just the removal of the fuel subsidy, it is also a better FX regime. In the recent, I think 2 weeks ago, we saw a harmonization of FX rates, which will benefit investment into the country and also local production. For the longest time, the Naira has been overvalued, making imports relatively cheaper than they should be if the Naira has a fair value. So, but of course, even now, we have companies happily growing and smiling to the bank, including internet. We couldn't be doing this without internet. And what you see on this page now are local solutions. So also online media. We don't have just Netflix. We also have local online streaming services that are now smiling to the bank. And of course, an important part is the healthcare, which has been grossly neglected in the last probably decades. And all of a sudden, Nigeria has woken up to the fact that it does benefit from having more investment in the health sector. And a lot of these investments are private sector run, with now also the support of the government. But when the dust finally settles, and we can only hope this will be sooner rather than later, we have opportunities across a number of sectors. And again, the ambassador has spoken in great detail about them. The Consul General added some more of the really Dutch opportunities, including the circular economy. I would like to say that they are driven, all those opportunities, by two major developments. One is that in the short term, we will be looking at shortages in foreign exchange income, making imports also more expensive at the end. So that will be driving, for example, food processing and manufacturing, same as it did when the last crisis happened in 2016. The other changes are the more positive changes, and they are driven primarily by what makes up Nigeria, and that is the young population, but also now some of the changing behavior we see because of this COVID crisis. For example, now that we're having a lot of remote sessions, but also that education is becoming more digital. We are now seeing more and more companies, including a Dutch company called Tunga, that recruits Nigerians in the tech space to work for international companies. So if you want that kind of quality, you have to increase and invest in education. And of course, it has been mentioned as Nollywood before, the creative industry. They are already set to take over the world. And don't forget that 1 out of every 37 people in the world is Nigerian. And I'm waiting for the first Epic Games company to be based in Nigeria. And at the end of the day, there will be a lot of infrastructural development to make all this happen. But like, the positive outlook is really driven by what makes up Nigeria, and that's that young population changing their behavior, becoming more international. And talking about Nigerian behavior, I'd like to say one thing, and that is Nigeria already knew how to deal with disasters. This is not an easy country. I've been running a company for 10 years, and there's a lot of challenges. I mean, even now I have 3 internet modems around me because you never know which one is working. And that same need for an alternative solution is always there when you do business here. And we are now saying, okay, the government is not providing support to SMEs. With all due respect, I've never gotten any support, and a lot of SMEs haven't gotten that either. So Nigerian companies are resilient, and Nigerian people are resilient. And what I liked a lot is in a McKinsey survey a couple of days ago, is that 67% of African entrepreneurs are still positive, despite the immense challenges that we're facing at the very moment. So For Dutch businesses, you've heard the ambassador and the consul general speak about what particular opportunities there are there. So again, I'm not going to go into that. But if you want to pick up business with Nigeria, and that will happen sooner rather than later, make sure to come with a very attractive proposition. Nigeria was price sensitive before, it will be even more price sensitive going forward. Have either that in your mind or create cost savings for the buyer of your solution. The second point is that we are going to a short period, hopefully a short period of foreign currency fluctuation, liquidity issues. I only have to look back at 2016 and see how difficult it was, even for the most liquid companies, to even get the dollars to pay for their supplies. So keep that in mind and adapt your strategy likewise. Don't expect your partner to keep a very big stock if there is a currency fluctuation, for example. Make sure to have very reliable feet on the ground. Nigeria will always remain a relationship economy. Personal interaction is key. The challenge now is, of course, we can't travel. So if you have a partner on the ground, make sure to support that one. If you don't have one, find a really capable and effective partner and support that partner and the clients you have. I mean, any relationship that you build now will really position you for better business going forward. But what I want to point out is Nigeria was never an easy country. I mean, it's not on top of the list of most companies. I mean, if I go around and say, come do business in Nigeria, then people are like, why? I mean, it's a very difficult sell, and I've been selling this country for over a decade, and I know. So it was never easy. And the initial period after this twin shock is going to be even more difficult. But that doesn't mean that there's not going to be any opportunities. And it also doesn't mean that you can't do any business. But more than ever, it depends on how you do business and with who you do business. So I want to give you a bit of inspiration because our house is burning down at the moment. But if it does, it gives you a better view of the rising moon. So that's it for me. Thank you very much. And I look forward to also the private sector comments coming after my presentation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Thessa Bagu, the founder of Naijalink. Indeed, our very reliable partner there on the ground. As you may know, Nigeria is also one of the few countries where the NABC is also having a local presence through a long-term project. This is actually in Kano, northern Nigeria. And the operations we're running there are aimed at introducing hybrid seeds, along with a number of members, agricultural companies, and the Dutch government. I'm therefore glad and proud to introduce NABC's Kabir Ademoh. He is the coordinator of NABC's Seeds for Change program, to give a brief introduction of the program and an overview of the opportunities in the agricultural sector in Nigeria. Go ahead, Kabir.
Good morning, everyone. So as Anna has already explained, my name is Kabir Ademoh, and we're stationed in Kano. The NABC is presently functional in Nigeria via the Seeds for Change project. It's an impact cluster funded by the Dutch government and supported by the private sector of the Netherlands. What is Seeds for Change? It's targeted at the horticultural sector, which the Netherlands has been a very big actor in. The project itself focuses on trialing hybrid varieties that are well suitable to the Nigerian context. We're focusing on about 5 different crops, which are tomatoes, onion, cabbage, watermelon, peppers. Those make the bulk of the vegetables that are being consumed locally in the economy and play a big importance for agriculture, specifically in the horticultural sector. We have about 6 companies from the Dutch sector who are part of this project. We have Weijen, Enzazaden, Syngenta, Copat, East West Seed, and we're using some of the Dutch partners like AfriAgri to do trials at the moment based in Kanu. So like I mentioned, it's going through a stage of trials and testing. So we have 2 trial farms where we test our varieties that are adapted to the Nigerian situation. And once we found out trials and varieties that we're happy with, we take them into the demonstration phase. From the demonstration, we do a capacity building to try and build the capacities of the local farmers and different actors and players in the horticultural chain. We have a knowledge transfer activity that has started, and we're working in partnership with Weijen University and Research. We're training about 25 extension agents across the country who will be able to expand and escalate some of the knowledge they will gain in being able to deal with hybrid seeds and increase productivity in the sector. This is all on the back of increased collaboration between Nigeria and the Netherlands. So it's been an increased partnership between both countries, and it's focused mainly on the horticultural sector for vegetables, potatoes, and horticultural seed production. Those have been the high priority, and presently we have the Nigerian Netherlands Seed Partnership, the Seed for Change program, Seed NL, and a host of other projects which are aimed at creating this enabling environments to boost more investment into the sector. We believe that with the prime position that Nigeria holds in the West African region and the population that we have, it will be very important to build this sector up because of the large population, about 200 million people and still rising, and with the need, as been mentioned by other speakers, to diversify the economy. So that being said, the opportunities in agriculture, we've divided that into 4 key areas. We have the horticulture, the dairy sector, the poultry, and the field crops. These are all traditional areas where a lot of the Dutch companies and Dutch businesses have been very active and very strongly present globally and particularly in Nigeria. So in the dairy sector, at the moment, we've had the NDDP, which is the Nigerian Dairy Development Project. It's a big opportunity for Nigerian producers, local producers, as the government is moving towards increasing the local capacity for raw milk production. That has been going on for quite a few years, but the restrictions on getting FX for importation was put in place from December last year. So there's been more increase towards trying to source locally the raw milk for production of dairy products. This is a big opportunity to build a sector which is in critical need of things like better fodder system for the cattle. We also need better breed of cattle with better genetics that can produce a larger volume of milk. A survey done at some point last year showed that the average milk production from Nigerian cattle was at about 252 liters a day from a cattle, which is almost 1/10 of the global capacity and potential. So we'll need to increase the genetics of our cattle. We need better equipment for the dairy, for the milking to be put into different clusters across the country. And if that's not enough incentive, Nigeria at the moment has the highest cost for milk per liter globally, the 4th highest. That's about $2.22 to a liter. We are hoping this price will go down as local production increases and the capacity is built up. Presently, we already have a lot of Dutch partners and interest already working in the sector. To scale, a market linkage organization funded by the Dutch government is presently working in the sector with Wamco, Friesland Campania. Some other companies like Ala and Nestle are present in the sector at the moment, but it provides a good space at the moment to invest into dairy. The market itself, it's been a drain on the FX, and has been mentioned with the FX fluctuation coming in. We're spending about $1.5 billion a year to import dairy products. This is going to be a big challenge with the present situation of COVID-19. So we will need to find alternative means of raising this raw milk production, being able to supply the processors, and that will have to come locally as it gets harder and harder to access foreign exchange, particularly the dollars, to import our products. So going over to the poultry sector in Nigeria, it's been the main source of animal protein. It's prime position for doing business in Nigeria in that sector. It accounts for about 25% of our agricultural domestic product. 65% of that cost goes into feeds. We already have some Dutch companies in Nigeria that are providing good feed, like Howdij, been marketed by AfriAgri across the country. They're providing good quality feeds that can increase the production of the broiler meat and also layer mash for the poultry feed. But apart from the feed itself, there needs to be better investment in veterinary equipment, veterinary products, the medications, the vaccines, and also more modern equipment to boost the capacity of the poultry sector. That is a sector that needs a lot of development, and a large population of the country relies on it. So poultry is a sector that is going to be on the increase, and I think it's worth mentioning that in the past few years, there has been a restriction on importation of the poultry meat, broiler meat for consumption. So it's a sector that is worth investing into, especially with the right personnel. The field crops are another area to look forward in the country. And the main field crops at the moment is the rice, which forms a staple field for the bulk of the Nigerian population. Sorghum is actually of big importance, especially to the breweries. Soybeans and maize form a backbone of the raw materials for the animal feed industry. It's a big opportunity in that aspect because we have a large arable land. We have about 90 million hectares, I believe, of land available for agricultural production. There's a large labor force available at the moment. And that gives us opportunities to be able to produce more field crops as we move our production of animal feeds locally from importation. So some of these crops are what's putting into consideration for future investments and future development in the sector. That brings me back to the horticultural sector, which is where we are primarily active in as S4C. The NABC's Project X4C is currently trying to develop the horticultural sector, which has been consistently increasing since 2014. Some of the key crops are tomatoes, onion, peppers, potatoes, the root tubers. You can see some of the tonnage on the screen. It's about 4.1 million tons of tomatoes produced annually. But this is still in contrast to the importation of tomato paste in the country, and the deficit is still very large. So we still need to improve our productivity. At the moment, we have about 8 to 10 tons to a hectare in terms of productivity for tomatoes, and that's way shorter than about 40 to 60 tons a hectare, which is achieved globally. So there's a lot of activities in that sector, but the productivity needs to increase. And that productivity will only increase with increased knowledge, increased capacity, better inputs in terms of seeds, in terms of the equipment being used, and even better irrigation equipment as we try to produce more crops per drop. The issues of irrigation and water, especially in the north with the issues of the Lake Chad Basin, is gaining more and more importance. And traditionally, horticulture has been done using flood irrigation from the north, but that is becoming untenable as the days move forward because of the situation with the water. So we need to invest more in irrigation equipment, drip irrigation, and more modern equipment that use water efficiently. Those are ways which we can reduce some of our production costs, reduce the impact on the environment, and be able to still be profitable. At present in horticulture, we have about 50% loss of productivity because a lot of the farmers are using farmer-saved seeds that they've used from the years before, or just generally getting inputs from sources that are not reliable and cannot be traced well. So we believe that with the S4C project, we are training them to see the importance of having good variety of seeds who have good genetics and have traceability to responsible companies that you will be able to use, and you don't end up losing a lot of your productivity trying to produce. So the capacity of our farmers are being improved, and we are trying our best to move this sector up. At the moment, the key areas for production are in Kaduna, Kano, Plateau states, where 50% of the production happens. Our favorable agronomic conditions are worth looking into. But processing is a big area that needs to be introduced, especially with the current pandemic of COVID-19. There's been a massive disruption to the fresh markets chain across the country. Produce from Kano have not been able to make it down to Lagos, and there's been a lot of wastage. And that's where processing is going to have an increased importance in our value chain, in the horticultural value chain. At present, Dangote Tomato have made a big foray into that sector. Tomato Jaws is making a big impact. GB Foods from Spain and Olams are also making big impacts in trying to process tomatoes. But onions need to be processed, peppers and a few other vegetables need to be better processed for longer shelf life and make it easier to transport, as logistics become a big challenge with this present situation. I've mentioned before that our tomato paste bill is on the high side as a country. We have about $360 million being spent on importation of tomato paste. We need to be able to increase those processing. So while the primary production is increasing, we also need to process at the other end to be able to align well with the market as logistics become more of a challenge in the current climate. But we will only achieve that if we can increase the yields of and meet the processors' demands. But yes, favorable government policies have been put in place, and the NABC is actively working in the sector. We hope to be able to move this sector forward with the support of the Dutch government and with the stakeholders in the country working together, and we'll be able to make a big impact. Thank you for your attention. Let's stay safe, and we'll hear more about the project in coming times. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Kabir Ademoh. We've heard a lot from our colleagues, also from the DIP, but let's also hear from the entrepreneurs who are currently active, Dutch entrepreneurs active in Nigeria. We start with Mr. Laurens Kreuze. He's been working and living in Nigeria for almost 6 years now. First as a partner for KPMG in 2017. He's interim CFO and advisor and board member of companies in several sectors. Mr. Laurens Kreuze, why did you decide to stay in Nigeria and look for new business opportunities after leaving KPMG?
Thanks, Anne. During my time at KPMG, I found out that I'm more a builder type of person than an advisor who likes to be involved with challenges and have yourself responsibility to solve those challenges. And as I saw that in Africa, and specifically Nigeria, there are more opportunities to build a company or take it to the next level and to deal with the challenges, I decided to leave KPMG after almost 20 years and stay here in Nigeria, and as the Dutch say, take the bulls by the horns myself.
Where do you think most opportunities will be for the Dutch companies once this whole episode is over?
I will focus on the trends that I definitely see. There is the trend of localization. There was already pre-COVID PC, there was the drive for localization driven by and stimulated by local content laws, had to ensure that the workforce in Nigeria is better utilized, but also from the motive of preservation of FX. But also from a global perspective, there will be more drive to localizations to shorten the supply chains. That will also be accelerated to my expectation in Nigeria. So definitely, if companies have a solution or a business that can stimulate or partly stimulate local production, so don't come here for one little thing and then move the rest of the value chain abroad. And it is not full localization, it is part localization, as also the Nigerian government understands that Rome is not built in one day. The other one is diversification. Of course, people living longer in Nigeria, having more exposure, know that that is the key word for the last decade, and it was also used by the last during the last oil price crisis in 2014-2015, and not so much happened. However, I'm a little bit more positive now. What is different is the urgency, and also that in 2014-2015 there was a change in government. So that delayed the process of change. Now the government is stable till 2023. So I have good hopes that the government is able to really make a change and really implement the measures that are and policies that are necessary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kreuze of AEBC Consulting. Already now we're going to the last speaker of today, also a representative of the Dutch business community, Mr. Steven Heukelom. He is the CTA of the Lekki Port project, which is currently being developed around 70 kilometers outside of Lagos Island.
Okay, so I prepared a brief presentation just to give an impression of the project that we are handling. So this is the general artist impression. You might know it from the news. It's often used when they refer to Lekki Port. It's predominantly set up as a container port, container terminal, but there is space to expand into different areas, like you see the liquid jetties on the right side and the dry bulk. I'll come to that. How do I move to the next one? Here. Okay, so Lekki Port is in the center, and as you can see, it's like a spider in the web. We have on the top, we have the shareholders. Lagos State is partner, NPA, and also together with Heukelom, who was the initiator of this large project, are into that. We're dealing with government on the left. Different ministries are involved. It's very complex because it's a greenfield port, and you know, we have to set up not only the terminal but also the whole port itself, all the navigation from the seaside, the roads to be connected, power. It's completely virgin beach when I came here 4.5 years ago. Then on the right side, we have China Harbor Engineering Consultant company is the EPC contractor, and Louis Berger is our consultant with the day-to-day management of the project. So as you can see at the bottom, we set up the container terminal, and the operator will be CMA Terminals, a subsidiary of CMA CGM, one of the biggest shipping lines in the world. In future, in the second phase, we will develop a liquid bulk terminal and a dry bulk terminal. So the master plan is set up to cater for that in future. This diagram, it's maybe a bit complex, but we start on the left top, where these are basically representing the phases that we went through the project. And yes, we many times we get the question like, this project takes a long time to lift off. And my usual answer is that yes, that's correct. But you have to imagine it's a greenfield port project. You start from scratch with your legislation, your concession agreements, you know, all these things. We have like 60 legal documents involved in this contract, in this project, from small to big sub-concession agreements. So yes, it takes a long time, not only in Nigeria, but even if you recall the second Maasvlakte in Rotterdam, it also took a long time before we left the stage of research and design and you know, engaging with the market, and when they finally put things together, then yes, it's a matter, I would say, of construction, and then you can go. So it's a natural process as described. And the last image showing the ship of CMA It says 18,000 TEU vessels, and I think this is one of the big achievements of this deep sea port, that actually Nigeria is then connected to the shipping line network around the world with the biggest category of ships, which will be good for importation of goods and export, but also it will create a transshipment hub, and it will attract more business in that way. This is a diagram that shows the phase 1 concession agreement that we have in place now, and it gives you a little bit of the key figures, like close to 2 kilometers of the main breakwater on that side to protect the port. The water depth will be 16.5 meters, allowing these large vessels coming to the port. And in the future, once the liquid terminals will be, liquid bulk jetties will be developed, the depth of the channel will go even down to 19.5 for the bigger ships. So yeah, you can see here the dry bulk and marine services is also a part. NPA, Nigerian Ports Authority, they have the mandate and the obligation also to manage the seaside logistics in terms of getting the ships in, being responsible as the master, harbor master, and making sure safe passage of vessels. And that also includes tugboats and pilot boats and all the communication with the ships. Let me quickly move on. Okay, so that's the next phase, which will follow once we are, done in a few years' time. I'll end with that. This is a representation in a layout. So where you can see the red is are the future developments, right? So phase 1 will be 2, 3, and 4 basically, with 2 berths for the container ships and 1 for the dry bulk. Okay, I have a few images here of the current status of the project. I think you can see for yourself. The main breakwater that you can see here is now 1,100 meters. And we need to go to 1,900. So we're making good progress. And so here on the back side, if you can see my cursor, will be the long quay wall, 1.5 kilometer is this side. And in the background, actually, you see in red is the Kellogg's factory, and you can see the palm oil refinery. So there you have the zone of around 900 hectares. On the backside, in the distance, actually here, is the Dangote refinery. So they are our neighbors on the land side. It's a project of 2,000 hectares of construction worth $12 billion. It's a big driver for the whole development of the area. So this is the, let me go back one slide. You see here, we are placing the X-BLOCS as a protection to the outside, right? So we produce these blocks on site, 30,000 in total, different sizes. So it's, okay, so here you can see the construction of the GROYNE. It's this one here, it's the breakwater on the left. We have one big one and 2 smaller ones. So the smaller ones are constructed out of the sea. They emerge and coming up of water, and then we connect them to the land. This is an image of the production facility for the steel piles. The whole quay wall, 1.5 kilometer, will be constructed from steel piles. And the Chinese, they took the option to create a production facility on site. So we will import steel coils through the port, and then at the site, together with these rolling machines, we will produce our own piles that can be used into the project. It's a very smart, efficient way of production. These are activities from last month or 2 months back, placing 2 test piles. just to test the equipment, test the soil, and test the whole construction method, actually. That has been done, so we are almost ready to start with the real production. This is another image of how the testing goes on, putting a big load onto the pile and, you know, measuring all the lateral and all the force going on. This is the dynamic compaction on site. It's a good soil in general. It's a good sand base, natural, but it has a little bit of pockets of some clayish material, a little bit more fines. So we are doing dynamic compaction, basically lifting the load and then compacting it. It's a grid of 2 by 2 meter over the whole site, so it's quite a lot of work. We have started also with the dredging. You can see here in the far distance the main breakwater going like that. And this will be the quay wall on the inside of the port. And then here we are adding sand that we get from the channel and the basin. We're adding it on the beach and later on also to the land. And yeah, so the dredging is also started. We have a dredging vessel, and hopefully soon we can add a second one to increase the production. This is a scheme, just a general scheme to indicate how things are being put together. We have started with the initial first construction in December 17, and the real, just also as a show and case, to show to people that the project is, you know, that we believe in the project. So private money was invested here to show that we're, you know, we're moving on, we're going, we're committed. So then the real construction started in September 19, and so we have a number of construction months, and then after that also, this is the list with the items in red. We need to have operating systems, we need equipment, NPA need to implement their maritime services, and also customs need to be set up. So this is a broad overview of what we do and how we are putting it together. And that brings me to the artist impression of how hopefully it will look when we're ready.
I'd like to conclude this webinar by thanking all the speakers from the private sector, of course, our partner Naijalink, and the two excellencies who were today on our panel. Actually, the upcoming webinar is already this Thursday. It's about Côte d'Ivoire, and next week there is going to be a webinar about doing business in Kenya. Thank you very much for joining, and I will wish you a very pleasant afternoon.